Hello, fellow risk takers, and welcome to my worst investment ever. Stories of loss to keep you winning. In our community, we know that to win in investing, you must take risk, but to win big, you've got to reduce it. This episode is sponsored by A Stotts Academy's online course, How to Start Building Your Wealth Investing in the Stock Market. I wrote this course for those who want to go from feeling frustrated, intimidated, or overwhelmed by the stock market to becoming confident and in control of their financial future. Go to myworstinvestmentever.com/deals to claim your discount now. Fellow risk takers, this is your worst podcast host, Andrew Stotts, and I'm here with featured guest, Coonoor Behal. Coonoor, are you ready to rock?
I'm ready. Let's do this.
So, Coonoor is the founder and CEO of Mindhatch, a firm that specializes in getting companies better results with creativity through design thinking, organizational improv, innovation facilitation, and diversity and inclusion. She's also the author of I Quit, the Life-Affirming Joy of Giving Up, which will be published by New Degree Press in April 2021. Coonoor, take a moment and fill in further tidbits about your life.
Oh, sure. On the spot already. Well, I am a longtime improv comedy performer. I've been doing improv comedy for 10 years. That's usually my one fun fact when I'm in a group of people, unless that group of people is other improvisers, then I struggle to find what my one fun fact is. But yeah, and I have a adorable Bernese mountain dog named Nika. She is named after a Japanese whiskey that I love a lot. Yeah, and those things pretty much wrap me up, I think.
That's good. And for the listeners out there, and what is improv, anyways? I mean, I think I know what it is. I think I've experienced it, but maybe just
Yeah.
give us a background of kind of what it is and what type of people do that.
Oh, yeah. What type of people do that? Okay, yeah. Let me like psychologically analyze improvisers. Well, one thing when it comes to like the type of people who do improv, I do think that there is this assumption out there that improv is kind of only for extroverts, or only for people who have like a propensity for the theatrical, and I do happen to be an extrovert, but I can tell you, having done this in multiple cities for many, many years, been on dozens of teams, improv definitely has and benefits from its fair share of introverts, and it really takes all kinds, because really what it's about at heart is just collaborating and learning the skills to live co-create something on stage out of nothing. And really there's no reason to like assume that an extrovert would be especially good at that, so I think it really does take a lot of different types of thinking and types of people, and everyone has their kind of strength and their role to play on a team, and you kind of figure out what that mixture of magic is, and hope that it comes across on stage when you perform. So
It's interesting.
um
It's interesting that you were saying like to create something out of nothing.
yeah.
Sometimes, I mean, I'm not a particularly good writer, but I have to write sometimes. And when I write something, I print it out, I read it, and I edit it. I go back, I rewrite it, and then at the end of that period of time of writing, I have a one-page document, and I'm like, damn, that was a white piece of paper.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. When you see like I mean, improv happens to be pretty ephemeral, it's like the exact kind of like you had to be there kind of art form, to really understand it. But it is pretty nice to have that blank page, that blank slate, and just kind of trust in your team and trust in the skills you've been working on, that those will see you through, and that you can kind of find the funny in anything and trust that the funny will come, just by being honest and truthful and playing with each other. So
hmm.
I hear you on the writing, because I started revising my book manuscript last night, in fact. So there's no secret why today I went and bought my first bottle of booze in a really long time. I think I'm gonna
It,
have to Ernest Hemingway my way through these revisions. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's so many things in your. I mean, you gave me a pretty short and tight bio, unlike most people that give me a very long one.
Oh
And
yeah.
but there's a lot of things in there that are to me interesting. So I just want to ask you a couple more questions before we get into
Sure.
your big question. And the first question is, wait a minute. Now I'm thinking for myself. I'm thinking. I remember Frank Zappa had an album. Does humor belong in music?
Uh,
And it was like, does humor or improv belong in organizations? And I'm thinking here you have organizational improv that you talk about.
yeah.
Tell us just briefly about how does that work? Most people think about
Sure.
work as pretty, stodgy.
Yeah, we think of work, we've all kind of, especially if you're growing up in the West and especially in the United States, you kind of you stop learning through play by the time you get out of elementary school, sometimes maybe even earlier, right? And then suddenly it becomes kind of like just fall in line and follow the rules and comply and conform, and you really stop knowing how to play. And there's a reason why children are like the greatest improvisers on earth, like the best, right? Because they don't see constraints, right? They only see possibility and they know how to play, right? It's how you first learn anything is through play. And so organizational improv is kind of like my and Mindhatch's phrase, for the application of the behaviors and the mindsets and the skills that are behind improv theater and improv comedy and applying them to the workplace. So, we find applications for it in a lot of like professional skills building, like using improv as the teaching methodology to get teams to be more collaborative, be more innovative, even training customer service skills or like leadership development. So, improv is because it's so innately human, right? You have nothing but yourself and your body and your voice on stage and your teammates on stage with you. It's such an innately human art form. It translates really well to something else that is innately human, which is in any organization, in any team, you're always kind of like trying to create something that's bigger than yourselves, right?
Mm,
And that's kind of what improv is too, and so I think the playfulness of improv is a really helpful conduit through which to kind of, relearn how we work and like just think in different ways, certainly more creatively and more collaboratively for sure. um, but yeah, I think it's all in an effort to kind of, not turn work into play, but just kind of recognize that there's a reason why we all started out with play, and why
mm.
it was so valuable. And it's sad that by the time we're adults, it's kind of beaten out of us, right? And it's
You kids, stop playing around over there. Stop horsing around.
yeah, totally. And so, but I think it can be like, a fish to water or like riding a bike, when I get a group of what you might think buttoned up, stodgy adults. I mean, God, I've done an improv session for the Pentagon on a couple of occasions and literally had like a general and like some dudes in fatigues who were like in my and they just loved it. Like
Yeah.
the people you wouldn't expect to have an easy time of like getting back into the groove of playfulness, and possibility. We all have that in us. Yeah.
It's yeah, so many things go on in my mind. First of all, I studied some seminars when I was young with a guy named Dr. W. Edwards Deming. He was the father
Mm,
of the quality movement, and one of his 14 points was to bring joy back to work, to bring
mm,
pride of workmanship, to bring fun to work. And he was a
yeah.
real humanist, although people would think of he would be the statistical guy. And that really is interesting because so many people think opposite. And
Mhm,
what's also made me think is that when I graduated from Cal State Long Beach, I went to work for Pepsi in Los Angeles as a
mhm.
management trainee, and I worked for 3 years and did my MBA there. And so I worked for 3 years in the U.S. and I've worked for 29 years in Thailand, either
Wow.
on teams or managing teams. Thais look at work so differently. And
How?
and I think one of the big things is that if work is not fun, they're gone.
Oh, that's fascinating. I didn't realize that about
Yeah,
times.
if
Yeah.
work is not if it's not fun,
Mm,
it's just not, and that's another thing is they're less money driven, let's say maybe than another culture in Asia,
mm,
let's say. So it's
that's true.
not their primary, their primary thing is the relationships that you make at work. They go out together after work, they go on
Mhm.
holidays together. They do all kinds of, and of course they have great sense of humor, so we have a lot
Yeah.
of fun at work. So in fact, I've spent my life either on teams or leading teams where, first of all, anger is not allowed in Thai society,
Mm,
and confrontation is forbidden basically,
mm,
and that has its good and its bad sides. But the good side about that is that people smile and have fun and try to get through it. Now there are
mhm.
some bad sides when you don't have that
Sure.
because all that, but it just made me think a lot about, what are the things I really love, and what's there's an infection happening in Thailand right now, and I think it's been spreading across Asia for a while, and it's not COVID. It is modern American management styles
Hmm.
of KPIs and numbers, and people thinking that they can get the most out of business by bosses sitting and looking at numbers and charts and graphs, and that people could be managed through numbers. And
Yeah.
that's its sad, sad state of affairs.
It is.
You know,
You're speaking my language because I am a design thinking, human centered design practitioner as well. And so when you use the phrase like humanist, that person described himself as, like, it really resonated with me because, human centered design, it's right there. It's like a people first, like, listen to your customers, your users, your employees, whoever it is you're trying to solve problems for, whoever's behavior you're trying to amend in some way. It's like, look at the people first, right?
mhm,
And really seek to understand them, and it's I'm not, of course, opposed to data for data's sake, right? Data has its place, but it's about getting intentional about when it's the right thing to lead with, right? And I think anytime you're working with people, which is a lot of the time, it's often not going to get the results that you hope, and it can sometimes be, frankly, like an act of cowardice. It's just like, oh, I'm going to look at the numbers because I'm too scared to talk to people, or I'm too scared of
exactly.
what they're going to tell me, and
There's a
but
bunch of wimpy uh, bosses out there that
yeah.
think that the numbers can tell it. And one of the things about numbers that I've learned over the years is that measuring things, I mean, ultimately as an analyst, I'm measuring things all the time.
Mhm.
But if I was to take your notebook computer, and I was going to measure the width of your notebook computer, would your notebook computer be aware that I'm measuring it? No, it would
Hmm.
not.
Mhm.
And therefore, measurement of inanimate objects is a pretty troubleless thing.
Mhm.
However, if I was to measure a person performance or other things, and the person knows that they're being measured,
Mhm.
then you raise a whole nother element. So when you measure things that are inanimate objects, measurement works perfectly well. But when
Mhm.
you measure things that know they're being measured, there's a
Mhm.
huge problem that comes up about that person's reactions to the measurement and
Yeah.
many, many different things. So
Yeah,
that's
I think
that's
anthropologists have confronted that over the decades as well, where it's like going in even to observe like a population, like your mere presence is changing that population, right? And it's entering in a factor that people have to respond to. So it is question just how unbiased can we be, and we fool ourselves when we think numbers aren't biased, right?
yeah,
Because they've been created by us, and so
exactly.
yeah, there's always going to be bias there. Yeah.
Yeah. So for those people that want to learn about this man, Dr. W. Edwards Deming, they could just type his name in the internet. I also wrote a book, which is on Amazon, called Transform Your Business with Dr. Deming's 14 Points. And that's where I tried to bring out what this man brought to me, which was that you can bring joy to work. I really want to get into one last thing on your bio. What the
Sure.
heck? How could you write a book and call it "I Quit"? Tell us just a little bit about what your meaning is in this book.
Sure. I mentioned that I just begun revisions of the book, so it is like all I'm thinking about right now. So I'll do my best to be brief. But the book is titled "I Quit: The Life-Affirming Joy of Giving Up." And it's really an idea that I had knocking around in my head for many years because I had noticed in myself that after years of being a perfectionist, after years of being the kind of overly committed, stick it out for the sake of sticking it out kind of person, I started to have some really excellent quits in my life. And I realized those quits, that they were very, very positive and that they really got me to where I wanted to be much more swiftly. And so this kind of process of not just reinvention, but just kind of making decisions about and for your life based on what you've learned about yourself, and what your trade-offs are, what your values are. Um, And so, yeah, so it was born out of my own experiences, but also just from talking to people, and it's always loving hearing people's quitting stories. And I think you can really understand someone really quickly when you just ask why they quit something, whether it's a
Mm.
relationship or a job or a city or whatever it might be. You can learn a lot about that person, sometimes even more than asking them why they chose to do something, and so the book is a collection of stories of everyday people and the things that they summoned the courage to quit in their lives, and why they have no regrets about it. And yeah, and so I hope the book is going to get people to rethink and reframe quitting and view it through a new paradigm, and realize that quitters aren't losers, and quitters are actually oftentimes pretty courageous and have a lot of self-knowledge and self-awareness to make the big decisions that make their lives better.
I'm looking forward to reading that, and I think I'll put any links to that I can get from you into the show
Oh, thank
notes, and I encourage the listeners to look for it. I mean, I wrote a piece about why we stopped doing performance appraisals in one of my businesses, Coffee Works, that I have in Thailand. And what we basically, because the reason why it's important is that many people go into, they think about quitting and they don't want to quit because they don't know what they're going to do
Yeah.
in replacement of that quitting
Mhm.
of a relationship or of a job. And what I basically said in that article that I wrote about performance appraisals is that after looking at them in a lot of detail, looking at the time spent on them, looking at how employees felt about them, the quality of them, what they really brought to our customer, we
Mm.
just came to the conclusion that this is a waste of time.
Mhm.
And the way that we did these performance appraisals and try to assign A, B, C to people and then rank them, it just goes against, so many things about the way, humans are. And we just found that nobody was really happy except a few people that were figured out how to kind of rig the system and get their
Mhm.
bonus every time. And so, but people ask us, well, if we don't do performance appraisals, what are we going to do?
Mhm.
And I said, that's just the wrong question.
Yeah.
What, you're going to keep doing something that's wrong
Yeah.
because you don't know what's right? The objective really is
Here.
stop doing what's wrong, and then actually the space will open.
Yeah, that is exactly what I learned from writing this book. Like a lot of the people who shared their stories with me happened to share with me their first big quitting stories, the first time they ever did it. And time again, I kept hearing like say like it one of the benefits was it just opened up my life to so many other things that I actually wanted, And so yeah, you're echoing exactly, one of the many kind of takeaways and themes from the book for sure. And
Beautiful.
and definitely this kind of idea that and I write about this in my introduction. It's uncanny what you just said. I referenced it in my introduction that like, we're so used to thinking of quitting as like a negative, like not just in like the stigma, the negative stigma, but also like it connotes the absence of something, that there's
Mm.
like nothing in its place, when actually, it's toward what you want,
There's
Yeah.
everything else. You're doing this. There's a million
Yeah.
things you could do.
Yeah.
Everything
It's not
else is
a
out
void.
there.
It's not failure, Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic. So, for the listeners out there, I challenge you right now to think about what is something in your life, a person, place, thing, a relationship, a job, a this or that you really know in your heart is not right for you. Maybe it's time to take a lesson from Coonoor and think about, you know, maybe it's time. And if it's not time today, then I challenge you to read her book in April, and then you'll be inspired. So, all right, now it's time to share your. Speaking of time, it's time.
Yeah.
Now
It's
it's
tough.
time to share your worst investment ever. And since no one ever goes into their worst investment thinking it will be, tell us a bit about the circumstances leading up to it, and then tell us your story.
Sure. Yeah. So my circumstances were that I had just quit my job at Deloitte Consulting to start my own company, to start Mindhatch. And, I remember just like immediately, and I don't blame myself, just going into like bootstrap mode. Like I remember even having like this piece of paper up in my bedroom wall and like writing down all the things that I should like cut out that were personal expenditures. Actually, I one of the things that was on the chopping block was I remember writing, stop buying books and like go to the library, And so I'm still a passionate library goer because I made that decision, 7, 8 years ago. So I'm in this bootstrapping mentality, because I'm starting a business of my own. I don't know what I'm doing. I know the things that I want to be doing for clients, but I don't know how to go about doing it, right? Um, well, one of the things I decided I should do is I should have a website. Of course. Like, why wouldn't you have a website?
I'm
Why
just
wouldn't
thinking, kind of
I?
like improv, where we
Right?
don't know what we're doing, but we're just
Yeah, yeah.
gonna do it.
Fill the space. Just say something and magic will happen. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna have a website, and but I was like, again, this bootstrapping mentality of like, I don't want to spend hardly anything on this website, and I really my expectations for the website were very, very low, but I thought I was being smart. I thought to myself, like, oh, I'm just like a single shingle consultant, like my website's not gonna like bring me business. People can't click and buy what I have to offer and use like an online shopping cart, and so I basically was like, I just need like I think at the time what web designers called like a brochure website. Like something just was really static, 2, 3 pages, who I am, what my niche does, email, done, and so I did hire someone to like make that for me, and because I'm not a web designer, I have no skill in that. And but I think I paid like barely $1,000, and I was like, okay, cool, I have this website up. Well, as like my business started to develop, and as I started wanting more for my business, and I started like, yeah, I'm a B2B business, and people aren't going to click and buy, but like I started learning like, wow, my website could be doing a lot more work for me. Like it could be a lead generator, it could answer questions that people are wanting to know about, these very niche, odd things that I do in my practice. And so over the years, it was just like, oh my God, like people will often ask me, like, okay, what's the worst thing about running your own business? Hands down, it's been my website saga. Hands down, it's been time after time after that first time, not finding a good person that I would work with a second time, for my website or for other things as well. And so, one, it took me a really, really long time to find like my forever web designer, who now I have and love her. But in those intervening years before I found her, it was just like web designer after web designer. And like every single one was like, we need to rebuild your entire website. And I was like, no. And it just became this like unwieldy patchwork of just crap on the back end and also probably on the front end, and it was like unusable by me, and it was just this like monster, and it was always a pain to do anything with it. And so my regrets around that are I wish I had been a little less bootstrappy at the beginning, dare I say cheap even. And I wish I just maybe had a bit more, I guess, sophistication around what a website could do for my business.
And do you tell us
Yeah.
about how your website is now compared to, the way you look at your website now, or how you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I go to well, first of all, I don't go to my website all that often because I hate seeing photos of myself. So I kind of don't go to it as often as I probably should. But it works, like I have like automation set up. I have like it's integrated with my newsletter and with like other forms, and it's you can download my one pagers. It's like a one-stop shop, where someone can go and learn and contact me, and I find business through that. People contact me, to work with me through the form on the website. And so it's working. I think there's always room for
Mm,
improvement, but
yep.
it's like the bones are now solid,
And
and
if
it took
if
a
you
long
had
time.
done that, if you had done that right at the beginning,
Oh,
how would it have changed your outcome?
oh my God. I would have definitely saved money. I would have saved so much heartache and annoyance and time that I spent either trying to teach web designers how to be professional and serve clients and
Mm,
ultimately firing them and then launching the seek the search for a new one, But yeah, it would have saved me a lot of time and a lot of heartache and annoyance for sure. Yeah, so I wish I had just made that investment right at the beginning to
Mm,
have something that was going to be able to grow with me and
yep,
grow with my business. Yeah.
yep. So there's a few things that I take away. I mean, one of the
Mm.
things is that I did the exact same thing,
Oh
and
my God, I'm so
yeah,
sorry. Yeah.
yes, it's so painful, and
That's the first advice I give to any budding entrepreneur or like small business owner. I'm like, don't skimp on your website. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
So what I did with and recently I've decided to really, really, improve. Now I've been improving them over time, but the bringing all the pieces together, it's just hard. I mean, the first thing that about it all that's very fascinating to me is that if you want to hire a full-time accountant to work in your business, you just put out an ad, looking for an accountant, and you hire them. You want to hire a full-time salesperson, put out an ad, get a salesperson. But I've found that it's very hard. If I was to say, I want to get uh, you know, I want to improve my website and make it a lead generator, a money generator.
Mm.
Who do you hire? Okay, there's a design person, but there's also the copy that's on there. There's the whole, it's a much more complex thing. And I just found that you can't hire someone. And nowadays, like I have, multiple websites, like seven
Mm.
or eight, and I could literally have someone sitting next to me working with me, but I can't find that person. Everything is outsourced in that
Mm.
area. And that's one of the unique things that makes it hard for small business. So that's my first kind of takeaway that I've realized is that I kind of got to do it myself in
Yeah.
partnership with some different people that can help in different areas. And now there are a small number of people that
Mm.
basically come along and say, I can take you from zero
Mm.
to, big revenue, but those people are expensive.
Yeah.
And you say, as any person starting a business, you got to be careful about the money. So that's kind of the first thing that I thought about. And the second thing is that what I did when the crisis came, when the
Mm.
COVID madness came, I figured, there's a lot of people out of work in Thailand, and there's a lot of young people that are looking for jobs and they can't find them. So I decided that I would offer internships in my company.
Mm.
And so, and I'm working on my home office basically, and I do have a pretty, reasonably sized facility here.
Mhm.
So I decided that I would offer internships. And from that time, from April until today, I probably had 60 different interns work with me. Some of them
Wow.
worked for a month, some of them have worked for 8 months, some of them I've hired.
Mhm.
And the idea then is I used that period of time to rewrite the websites. And
Mm.
it's really hard, it's hard for everybody to put together. But I recommend one book that really helped me, and it's called Story Brand by Donald Miller. And it basically is talking about, creating a story for your customer. When someone comes to your website, they want to see a story about a transformation. And so
Nice.
that book helped me a lot to rewrite my website. So that's a second thing. And I just think it's a huge challenge for any startup. But those are some of my takeaways. Anything else you would add?
Yeah, no, I would just plus one to what you said earlier about like, when I I mean, there was definitely a day, many days in fact, where I didn't know the difference between a web designer and a web developer, like let alone back end, front end. Like there's I think one of the biggest surprises to me when I first started Mindhatch was, like I was like a humanities major. I studied journalism. I've always been in kind of like the softer side of business, and so I thought marketing. I know what marketing is. That is probably a thing that I can do on my own that I don't need to outsource. But then I started my company and I just realized, wow, marketing is a giant umbrella. There is a lot under that and a lot of specialties and subspecialties, and like I remember like learning that like okay, like not every web designer is actually knows SEO. Like there are whole SEO experts out there, and so it is like part of the growing pains of like running your own company is kind of like learning yourself what that
Yep.
patchwork of people is that you're going to need and understanding when it is worth the investment to like go for the one-stop shop, even if maybe they have some things that you don't need,
Hmm.
but yeah, so definitely I can commiserate with that.
So the next question I want to set up a little bit before I ask it, and that is, let's think about our listeners out there who are, maybe they lost their job in the
Mhm,
COVID time and they're trying to set up their own business. They
mhm,
are setting up their website. Up until this point, they've kind of thought about it the way you've described you thought about it at the beginning. Think about that man or woman who's listening right now and try to answer this question in relation to them.
mhm,
Based upon what you learn from this story and what you
mhm,
continue to learn, what one action,
mhm.
one, would you recommend our listeners take to avoid suffering the same fate?
My advice is contingent upon how long you want to do the thing that requires a website. And so if you are committed that it's going to be something you're going to do for 3 or more years, I say invest in that website upfront. I think maybe part of my own lack of investment was maybe just my own insecurity around how successful my business would be and therefore how long I would do it. And
Mm,
so, but I think I should have known that I was going whole hog and wasn't looking back. And so I think if that characterizes you as well, like you're into it, I say, don't skip on your website. Really make
great
that
advice.
investment and let it help you.
Great advice. And I think, one of the things for the listeners out there is that you mentioned that just kind of touched me. And in fact, I just feel a little bit seriously touched by it in a sense that insecurity and how you feel about your business and yourself when you start. And therefore, you may shy away from doing the website because of that insecurity. And so, I want to put out a challenge to all the listeners out there. If you're going to be doing your own business and you're going to be going out there, I challenge you, put it out on the web in a great way. Put yourself out, take the risk, build it in, build your story, build the story of transformation of your customers, and it will reward you tremendously in the long run. So that's my challenge to the listeners. What do you think? Good challenge?
I think it's a great one. It's a great one. It's definitely taking the risk, but also how big of a risk is it? That's like to tie it back to my book. It's a risk if you do, and it's a risk if you don't, right?
Yep.
Why is one inherently more risky than the other? So
Yep.
mhm.
Fantastic. All right. Last question. What's your number one goal for the next 12 months?
Okay, the next 12 months. Well, definitely I've got book brain going on. So my number one goal is to, of course, launch the book in April. End of April is when it will be published. And I'm already, starting my like virtual pre-published book tour. So my number one goal for next year is to sell a lot of books and also get to talk about my book, to do provide keynotes and do author talks and book talks, at organizations and at conferences. So that's my thing I'm most looking forward to in 2021.
Fantastic. Well, listeners, there you have it. Another story of loss to keep you winning. Remember to go to myworstinvestmentever.com/deals to claim your discount on my course, How to Start Building Your Wealth Investing in the Stock Market. As we conclude, Coonoor, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. And on behalf of A Stotts Academy, I hereby award you alumni status for turning your worst investment ever into your best teaching moment. Do you have any parting words for the audience?
Gosh, just try it out and experiment. Most things in life are not as risky as you think they are.
Try it out and experiment. Go for it. Well, that's a wrap on another great story to help us create, grow, and most importantly, protect our well fellow risk takers. This is your worst podcast host, Andrew Stott, saying, I'll see you on the upside.